All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining today. I'm really excited to host this webinar today with Rick Gomez. So the 3C's of driving employee growth and retention. And just to get started here, I'm going to go through a little bit of introductory information, and then we will jump into the main content of the session today. So for those of you who I have not had the opportunity to really get to know yet, I'm Neena Newberry. I'm the founder and CEO of Newberry Solutions and also teach in executive education at SMU Cox School of Business. But I founded this company 17 years ago, and the focus has been on developing high performing leaders. Also have a lot of passion around women in particular. And we have expanded beyond our leadership development services, which include coaching and consulting, and now also have developed a leadership development platform called New Lens, which we're super passionate about because it's all about giving more people access to leadership development. Prior to that, I was at Deloitte Consulting for 14 years, and both as a consultant as well as an HR executive. So I'm really excited to share a little bit more about who we are. We have been in business for a long time at this point, way longer than I ever thought we would be in business for. But we have a lot of passion around putting thought leadership out there, whether that's through our white papers or articles that we publish primarily in Forbes and Fast Company, but also taking our skills and experience and applying that to the community that we live in. And so we're involved with a lot of nonprofits here locally in the Dallas area. And in terms of the work that we do, we definitely focus a lot on industry insights and looking at how we can take that and apply that to the companies that we work with. So really looking at the key needs in leadership development, building a stronger pipeline of talent, and then also looking at technology solutions. But at the end of the day, the common thread that runs through this is driving sustainable high performance. And our New Lens platform, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the tools that we have developed to really accelerate customized development at scale, but in a way that works. So our focus is really around driving lasting change. And so this is a way for us to be able to provide more access to tools and resources that can drive high impact. So with that, I just want to put a quick plug in for our webinars here. So if you haven't been part of any prior webinars, I mean, we've had a lot of great companies that have been part of these conversations, and we'll continue to do these webinars. So if you're not on our list, Rachel will put this link into the chat for you as well so that you can join that list and make sure that you're invited to future webinars too. And with that, I am going to introduce our speaker today. So Rick Gomez, and I've been doing work with AT&T since 2011. And Rick, honestly, I can't remember exactly when we met, but it's been so long that I can't remember when we met.
Been a long
Although I
time,
have to
yeah.
say, yeah, the COVID experience definitely wiped away timelines for me, but super excited to have you here, especially given your depth of expertise, your breadth of expertise. I mean, you all can see this here, but Rick, I'm going to ask you to jump in and just share a little bit about your background and what you think this audience should know about you, because I think you bring so much to the table here.
Sure, sure. Well, hi everyone, and really glad to be with you. Thanks, Nina, for having me. And I actually am really excited and fortunate to have this conversation. I think it's so relevant to what we're doing right now internally in the company, what's happening outside in the broader industry. But just a little bit about me. I have been at AT&T a long time, so I think this is my 28th year. So don't try to do the math of how old I was when I started, but been an incredible career that I'm really really grateful for. And in those 28 years, I'm actually pretty proud to say that I've actually spent the entire time in HR doing exactly what I've always wanted to do. I was really passionate about how important it was to make sure that you cared for your human capital as you think about how your company's going to be successful early on. And so I went to school to be in HR and have been doing exactly what I've been doing. So over that 28 years, done a little bit about everything that you can do in HR, from compensation to benefits to talent acquisition. Started a new company, a startup company in New York. Had an opportunity to be the head of HR and have responsibility for all HR functional areas. So done a little bit about everything, but have been in this role, which is actually truly and genuinely my favorite part of HR, which is the HR business partner. So I'm really grateful that I have an incredible talented team around me that leads our HR business partners team. And so we support over 100,000 employees of just over about 135,000 employees that we have here at AT&T. So call it 75% of the company. And we are there just to make sure we do everything we can to enable our clients to be successful. So, being very client focused, very solutions oriented into all things of HR. So, when you think about AT&T, parts of the business like our retail organization, our call center organization, our network organization, all of the sales organizations, as well as corporate strategy, corporate development. So is what my team does. So really grateful for a really fruitful career that I've had here at AT&T, and glad to be with you all today.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. I mean, it's amazing the number of things that you've done just in the time period that I've personally known you. And one thing I would definitely say is, that ability to pivot and switch from thing to thing is just incredible. I think you've demonstrated a lot of resilience, as has your team. And, I mean, when you think about the magnitude, 100,000 employees, that is huge. Right. So to be able to stay on top of what are the key issues, what are the things that we need to focus on, how do we prioritize, all in the context of a very changing landscape. Right. Nothing
Yeah.
has been static, especially the past few years. I think we've all gotten a lot of gray hair. You just can't see mine because I've taken care of it. But
For sure, for sure.
yeah. Well, thank you again for making time. And when we talked about trying to schedule this, I've been trying to get Rick for a while, so I'm super excited that you've been able to make time today. I'm like, a Monday? Yes, absolutely. We'll make it work on a Monday. So just happy to
Figure
have
it
you
out.
here.
Yeah. I'm glad to
All
be here.
right, so we're going to dive in and start talking about the topic today, the 3 C's of driving employee growth and retention. And one of the things I want to remind you all of is, the format of these webinars is typically that I'm sharing some data, some trend information, and then we're talking about the realities of how that really comes into play, in organizations. And so certainly there are things that I can share from that perspective. Rick, you've got plenty to share from an AT&T perspective as well. But this is also a chance for you all as an audience to share ideas as well, share things that you're doing, share challenges as well, so that we can also tailor the conversation as we're continuing. So Rachel, keep an eye on that for us, to see if there are certain things that we need to touch on as we continue going. But I'm going to go ahead and start off with the first C here, which is content. And let's talk a little bit about what we're really driving at here. So in the context of an environment where you have the demand for learning continuing to grow, so that consistently shows up as an overall theme. Is people want that investment in their growth and their development, and it absolutely has an impact on retention. So when we look at content, one of the key pieces here is looking at the need to focus on the right skills, whether we're talking about upskilling, reskilling. We've got a pretty big scenario here, which is that people aren't fully ready for the roles that they're in, let alone the next level, right? There's been so much change. And so developing those right skills continues to be absolutely critical as we continue to see shifts in the workplace. The second piece around this is that it really has to be relevant, right? Personalized and agile. So this is not a once and done kind of scenario. So people are looking for information and experiences that are very tailored to what they need. And especially in the context of them not having a whole heck of a lot of time to focus on their development. The latest statistics, it's about 24 minutes a week, and those 24 minutes are typically interrupted at least 3 times. So, it's not easy to carve out time for that development, but people are looking for a focus on real world challenges, actionable insights, and immediate application, right? How do I take this and make it relevant and apply it to the world that I'm living in and the challenges I'm facing? And then the third piece here, and you see this a lot in just how people are engaging socially, right? You think about TikTok, Snapchat, all of that, right? Everything's micro, 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 and people are creating some of their own content, right? And so micro and social formats are really critical to expand that reach, expand that retention of information as well. And so when you look at this data here, 9 out of 10 L&D professionals indicate that employees prefer micro-learning platforms and snackable content. Right? There's a lot going on. Give me little bits that I can digest and start applying. So that's a bit of the landscape here. And so Rick, as I was mentioning earlier, readiness is a big thing, right? Like getting people ready and doing it in ways that work. So content absolutely matters. But what are some ways that you all are approaching this and accelerating readiness?
Yeah, that's a great topic. And I think about just the evolution, Nina, about that we've been on relative to how much the business has changed and all the transformation that we've had as a company. But really, this particular topic about how we make sure that we're training and educating, developing, and making sure our employees have the right skills has changed so much. So just, I think about, gosh, when I joined, when everything about training had to be done in a classroom type setting, and where we've evolved today, that has changed. But I think the piece that what you mentioned around how important it is to make sure that we are thinking about this and how we personalize those experiences and make it relevant for each individual. And as you know, obviously, not everybody consumes and learns and takes in information the same way. And so we've got to make sure that we're definitely tailoring that to how best it's going to be absorbed for them, but also thinking about how relevant the information is. And so for us, the way that we think about even just the micro learning piece around and having these bite-sized pieces of ways to consume new learnings or education or information that's changing or whatever has definitely changed. And so if I think about like our frontline organization, we've got to think about ways to go integrate learning into their daily task, into their daily routine, and versus trying to think about how we're going to go take them off of out of their store or off their phones or whatever. And so that could be done, and we do it today through little, you called it snackable, bite size, whatever we want to call it, ways to go share information. It could be done through gamification and tools that they have. So when they're logging into systems that they use each and every day, how they'll get information served to them that's relevant, and ways for them to learn about maybe a new enhancement that we have in the tool, or a new product that we're launching, or a new pricing model, or whatever the case may be. But it's actually just making sure that it's woven in to their daily task, and it's not something that they have to go do. And I think that that's been really well received. I also just think about how with technology and everything that we can spend hours and hours talking about AI and the evolution of what that does, even in this space or whatever, is so relevant too, though. But for me, I think about how we got to make sure that we're thinking about this from a consumer's lens in terms of the way that we've got to adapt how we go to market with our consumers, but we've got to be continuously thinking about for our own employees how we need to make sure that we're staying relevant to all the ways learning is changing the space, and making sure that we're thinking about the skills not only needed for today but tomorrow. And I think that is a big part that we could also spend hours talking about our skills transformation and evolution of how we're making sure that we bring our employees along, but we're definitely doing everything to provide them those opportunities to up skills and make sure that they're being relevant. So it's an evolution, but I think it is one of the things that we're thinking about, business unit by business unit, employees by employees, because what works in my retail organization is not going to be the same that works for my field technicians, for example, that I have that you see driving all over town, or for maybe our cybersecurity team that needs to really think about that learning evolution and their readiness a little bit different.
Yeah, and it sounds like, I mean, there are probably some themes that run across these different groups, but then I'm hearing you say, gosh, we have to really personalize it based on the specific area that people are in, and then leverage technology or look at our existing tools and see how do we really deliver things in ways that is bite-sized. So
Mhm.
there are multiple pieces that you're really balancing there. But it's interesting that you're talking about the consumer side of things too, because just as you would have to pay attention on the consumer side to what's happening, it's the same way like your employees being yet another consumer, but
Yeah,
different landscape there that you're talking about. So I think just being able to strategically kind of lift your head up and say, okay, these are the most important pieces, especially when
Mhm.
things are moving so quickly, is just absolutely essential. And I remember even when we came out with our new Lens platform, micro learning was defined as more like 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
Mhm.
And our content is 2 to 7 minutes long, and
Now,
it's like
yeah,
very quickly gotten to shorter, shorter, shorter. I mean, nowadays it's hard to keep someone's attention for more than like a minute and a half or 2 minutes. It's you got to catch people very, very
yeah,
quickly in that overall process. The other piece I want to touch on here is this aspect of relevance and thinking about your own personal journey here in terms of staying relevant, continuing to learn, because things are just changing so
yeah,
darn quickly, right? And you're covering a very, broad population as well. And even when I just think about in the past 5 years, how much has happened, COVID and beyond, and all the different ways that HR has had to iterate. So I'm just
yeah.
curious, what you've done as well as any advice you would have, for people that are listening today.
Yeah, no, this is another great topic, and I'll kind of take that in two different buckets. As I think about personalize this for me and how I make sure that I'm staying relevant, because there's just aspects around how do we make sure that we're truly staying true to our profession around being an HR professional and practitioner, and how do we make sure that we're staying relevant and current with what's changing outside of the walls of AT&T. So if you think about for an employment law landscape or new guidance that we're getting or requirements that we're getting from the government, whatever, how do we make sure that we're staying relevant? And so for me, that's literally a daily thing, whether that be reading a white paper from an HR professional or a CEO of somebody that's talking about how this is going to change their landscape, but also getting information from like organizations like SHRM or Gartner or whatever, that I can just make sure that I'm staying current. But it's also talking to people in the industry, because I think that's where I get a lot of my learning, is just staying, really connected with others that are maybe similar roles or doing, something similar at other companies, just to see how they're tackling and how they're navigating and all the changes. You mentioned COVID. Who would have ever thought some of the decisions that we had to make around how we were going to care for our employees, but more importantly, how we were going to continue to still deliver the services and support that we needed to our customers, and that pivot and what we had to do. Like, it was so important for me to reach out to others across, HR, across different industries, to see how they were doing in that learning. So I definitely say, like, for me as an HR professional, you've got to stay current and make sure you're thinking about best practices that you're doing, but not only you're doing, but other companies are doing, and how we maybe need to
Mhm.
pivot. And so then I think about that, the other side of that, which is really the learning that we need to do to continue to stay relevant internally in the walls of AT&T. And so learning the business, I call it know the business, is something that I do with my team. And so everything that we can do to make sure that they are staying current on how our business evolved or challenges in our business. And that could be the way that our business is changing from our customers, or what we need to do with our technology, but just doing everything they can, my team and I can, to just stay connected. At the end of the day, the way that I think about this role that we're at is where we serve as business partners, is that I want my team to be seen as a business partner at the table, somebody who's got insights to be able to help them shape decisions and to truly add, information to help them make decisions, but is not just seen as the HR person. So not just as a person that's sitting at the table that has that
Mhm.
HR cap on, but really can be a good strategic advisor and a broader thinker
Mhm.
around the business. And we're only going to be able to do that if we stay current with what's evolving and being proactive, very client focused, very solutions oriented, and really thinking out of the box. The way that we approach our work as well. The way that we made decisions or supported the business just a couple of years ago is different. But I, tell my team all the time, the way that we stay relevant is we provide, added solutions and consultative support that you can't get from, maybe using AI or just reading something online. And that's been really important for me and my team
Mhm.
to think about our own readiness and development.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic because I think you're laying out kind of a spectrum of things. Like, so there's development that you can kind of go through in terms of attending stuff, listening to stuff, but you're
Mhm.
also talking about the importance of getting out there, having conversations with people, proactively
Mhm.
seeking out information. You may be attending conferences
Yeah.
as well. But AI, absolutely, like one of the things that we're doing as well is actually teeing up AI to actually send us a synthesis of
Mhm.
latest trends and themes, and actually specifying specific sources so that, there are definitely ways to make this easier, as well as using AI to challenge how you think about things. So having it be a thought partner, right? Like, what are the questions I should be asking myself or others? What are the things I should be thinking about? And so I think that especially the more experienced you are, the easier it is to recognize when you might be getting something bogus from AI. And so that
Yeah.
radar, I think, has definitely been much more refined, right, in terms of really recognizing what's useful information. But yeah, things are continuing to change at such a fast pace. And so, for the audience here today, whether you're joining today as a business leader or HR leader, I think that the kinds of strategies and things that we're talking about absolutely make sense, right? Whether it's for your own development or for your teams. So I'm going to keep us
Yeah.
moving here,
Oh,
and let's get to the next piece that we want to talk about here. But oops, I forgot we have a polling question before that though, because I do want to get a sense of what you all are doing as well. So, what content strategies has your organization successfully implemented? And so, Rick has just launched that polling question, so we'll give you a minute just to respond there. So on-demand learning, micro learning, social learning, which is more about sharing your ideas easily, creating your own personalized learning with AI, because there's a lot more of that that's accessible now. Um, and it may be all of these. So we'll give you just a minute to respond there. All right, we've got a few more coming in, so we'll give you just a little bit more to respond. All right, I think we can go ahead and end the poll and share the results, but it looks like our big winners are on-demand learning and micro learning are the top two, but on-demand learning, I mean, I think that's been in place for quite some time for many organizations. And then it's interesting, there's, quite a few people who said social learning as well. So would love for you to, for those of you who selected that one too, to just put in chat, like, what are the ways that you all are doing that? Would love to hear a little bit more about how that's being implemented. And then there were several of you who said all of these apply. So thank you for sharing more information. But I mean, we're absolutely seeing, trends shifting and how all this content is being shared and how learning is. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot more shakeup here in terms of learning and development, especially as AI continues to play a bigger role. So, and Reka, I'll let you jump in if there's anything else that. Oh, actually, Dominique, I see you shared. Dominique is from Kraft Heinz. She's one of our prior speakers as well. But social learning, more opportunities for breakouts, connections, role plays, cohort based. Yeah, absolutely. And Becca, social learning quarterly around specific and relevant topics, led by a peer. So that's fantastic. I mean, I think these things not only get to, um, get to allow people to share information with each other, but the relationship aspect can be really powerful as well. So let's jump into coaching, which is our next C. And let's look at what some of the latest data shows here. And so, a lot of times there's training that's in place, but boy, when you add coaching as a follow-up to training, the data is pretty staggering here. You can boost productivity up to 88% from 22%. That's huge. That feels like low-hanging fruit. And I know that sometimes it's not as easy to put a solution like that in place in an affordable way, but it's definitely powerful. The other thing that I found this very interesting because I had not seen this before, but coaching builds ethical leadership. So strengthening transparency, accountability, purpose-driven decision making. And as someone who has coached executives for a long time, I would say that aspect of being very intentional and being focused on who you are authentically as a leader, I mean, that ends up becoming a focal point. So this makes sense. And then when you look at hybrid and distributed workforces, there's a combination here that works really well. We've already been talking about micro learning, but experiential assignments compounded with that, and then social formats like peer coaching. So the peer-to-peer connection piece can be a super like low cost but high impact solution here. And so, I'm curious, Rick, you all have used coaching for a long time. I mean, that was my entree into the organization was working
Mhm.
with you all from a coaching capacity, but, you all do a variety of things. So I'm just curious how you all are leveraging coaching and in a way that's affordable, but is also making things stick, right? Because I've also seen where
Yeah,
coaching can just be popped in here and there a little bit, but it
yeah.
may not fully result in the change that you're looking for.
Yeah, it's got to be built into your culture, your DNA, the way that you hold leaders accountable, the way that you trust and create this environment where that's encouraged. But definitely, as you said, coaching can come in so many different ways. It doesn't have to be through a formal development program or a formal executive coach or a coach that you hire or whatever. But that peer to peer to your supervisor to the employee, just really anyone in the business. What I think is important there though is what I've learned over the years is where you've got to pick someone and you've got to align with someone who's going to make sure that they give you open and honest and genuine feedback and that they're doing that for your own growth and development. But, as I think about, the way that coaching has really, kind of helped me grow and be successful is really around surrounding yourself with people that are going to give you that raw feedback. So, everybody loves hearing the great job, like the high fives, the pats on the backs. Everybody loves that. But where I have always learned from is when I got the feedback that hurt a little bit, right? That was a little prickly, that made me feel like, oh my gosh, that's a different perspective than I was thinking. I always talk about this example where I had a big presentation that I had in front of a lot of our senior leaders or whatever, and I thought I did really well. And when I came out of it, my coach, my mentor, whatever you want to call it, said, "Hey, this is where I feel like you've got an opportunity to think about when you're in a meeting like that." And so that hurt because I was thinking, man, here I was expecting to get the high five and got the feedback, but I reflect on that because that's where that growth came from. So now, anytime I'm actually in a similar situation, I'm thinking about that coach of mine that gave me that feedback, and it really, really did fuel me wanting to make sure that I do better and that I don't put myself in that situation again. So for me, I think it's important that you just find that person, whoever it is, whether that be again a peer or just a colleague that you've worked for, or a former boss, whatever, that's going to just invest in that time, but also invest in a way that's going to be useful for you to really benefit from that feedback, and that open and honestly and that genuine, that just pull the band-aid off type of feedback is so so important. It's what I truly feel. So like we do that all across the business, even just our mentoring circles, whether that be things that we do with our business units or through our employee groups or whatever. Those are so valuable to hearing the stories of people in similar situations and how they handle that. I think that's where a lot of that growth comes from. The power of storytelling is so important, and you can get that feedback in those
Mhm.
really safe places is important. But it's got to be something that is embraced, valued, encouraged across all levels across your leadership team, and for it to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I totally agree with you around embedding this in the culture. And because there's so many organizations where just that feedback piece is very difficult. And I'm going to put kind of feedback hand in hand with coaching, right? Because there's an element of you need to have some self-awareness about how
Mm-hmm.
you're coming across, what's working, what's not working. And then there's the other piece, which is continuing to build your capabilities, right? So feedback is one piece of it. The other piece is coaching to help you understand like how you can own the solution, you can come up with the answer, you can figure out the path forward. So it's a combination of these two things. And one of the things that's been interesting is as we've rolled out New Lens, we've got three different types of coaching that we're really integrating into it. So it's coaching from your manager, it's coaching from your peers as well, and then there's coaching that you're getting through the platform. And part of it is, when you think about being that person who's in the middle of all of that, the level of self-awareness goes up dramatically, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you think about organizations using 360-degree feedback and those kinds of things versus being in these live settings
Mm-hmm.
and situations where some of it you just get to see how other people approach things and how different that may be from how you're approaching it and thinking about it. And there's absolute learning and self-awareness coming from that. But then also, I mean, you've got the opportunity to share some of your strengths and capabilities. I mean, there's so many pieces that come into play when you create the forums to do this, and it can be super simple and easy. Dominique was mentioning about the cohort, approach as well. So I think, and the other piece is how much as an organization are you helping people at any level develop coaching skills?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's huge, right? Like, do you want to always be the problem solver for your team, or do you want to, coach them in a way where they can do that? So this whole
Right.
thing about capability, capacity is an important one too. So Rick, I don't know if that's triggering any other thoughts for you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I resonate with all of that. I think, gosh, if I just think about personally some of the best coaching that I got, it actually has been from people that have worked, for me or below me, or, not even on my team. Because I think there's a angle of that they see things through a different lens that maybe you're not, kind of self-aware, call it whatever. So like I always try to think about when I'm even in a situation where I'm like wanting that feedback, that I'm thinking about all places where I'm going to get that, and it's not just your supervisor or a peer that may be
Hmm.
thinking about that way. So yeah, just encourage people to always get feedback, just genuinely from someone who's doing it for all the right reasons, but it's going to give you that raw feedback. But it comes in all kinds of different forms for sure.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And Liz, who's been one of our past speakers as well, put a comment in the chat too about letting people know that you're open to feedback is important.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because sometimes, I didn't. Well, you got to say it. And,
Yeah.
and especially in an era where I feel like we're just going from thing to thing to thing, right? So your body language may not
Mhm.
necessarily show that you're open to it, but it may just be because your mind's on the next thing you've got to get to. So, articulating it can absolutely be helpful. So, we're going to do another polling question here real quick. So what types of coaching does your organization use? So, some use internal coaches or external coaches. Peer coaching, we've been talking about that a little bit too, and then programs to develop coaching skills. And there may be other creative things that you all can think about here too, but let's see where we land on this one. And it's funny, like in my Deloitte days, way back, I mean, so this was like back in the I guess early 2000s, we had a huge internal coaching group, and it was really powerful to be able to have that as a resource. But it's been interesting to see over time how companies have gone internal to external to maybe a blend, just kind of back and forth. So we'll give it another minute or two here. So if you haven't had a chance to answer the polling question, please hop in and then we'll close the poll. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and end the poll and share. Oh, it looks like maybe we've got a couple more coming in. I'll wait just a second. All right, we can go ahead and end the poll. But it's interesting to see in the results, if you wouldn't mind sharing the results here, the external and internal coaches are more aligned. Whereas, it's been interesting because in the past, well, what I've typically seen is after you get to a certain level that you're providing coaching for, a lot of times it's like we're going to use external people for that, and internal coaches for other levels. But the financial aspect definitely comes into play, in terms of impacting organizations. So, but it does look like peer coaching and programs to develop coaching skills are on the radar as well. So if there are any other thoughts that you all want to share about how you're using coaching in your organizations or anything that you think would be helpful to the group, please do put that in the chat as well. All right. Okay, so we are going to keep going here the time is just going by very quickly. So we're trying to be as micro as we can in these webinars, but still give you all something meaningful here. So the third piece that we want to talk about today is connection. And this has been coming up throughout our conversation as well. But one of the things that I think you all absolutely know is that organizational boundaries have blurred, right? You've got different ways to define this, especially as you've got some people in the office, some people remote, some it's a hybrid scenario, but then you've also got jobs that, also require people to be in certain physical locations because of the nature of the work that they do. But all of these different iterations and ways that things come together have increased the level of complexity, pretty significantly. And so, and then that also makes the ability to connect a lot more complex as well. And then leadership capabilities focused on connection really matter a lot now. And so specifically things like your ability to inspire people, your ability to influence people, being adaptable, learning, teaching each other, right? And even when I think about my days at Deloitte, it was more of an apprenticeship model, right? You hire smart, talented people, you work, arm in arm with others on engagements and you learn, and it's just so much, there's so much that's shifted for organizations. So, the ability to lead people through change, influence, motivate, all of that, that connection really matters because it builds trust. And but definitely what we're continuing to see is that content coaching and connection, and then tying all of that to business outcomes. Like all of this has to be tightly coupled together. And so, it's interesting, Rick, especially you all have had the big return to office shift, and some people
We've heard
actually
about
had to
that, huh?
move, right? I
Yeah.
mean, all jobs aren't available in all locations. So I'm just really curious as to what you're seeing in terms of the impact of these shifts, and then on the other end of the scale, McKesson, they've got a lot, people don't have to be in the office, but then, so, and then there are other companies deciding it's like we've put return to office in place, but we haven't fully enforced it. So we've got quite a mix of things out there today. So just curious, what you're seeing in terms of the impact of doing the return to office and impact on connections specifically.
Yeah, it's definitely been a huge pivot. If you just think about, the way that we needed to quickly move to be able to support our employees and the business I mentioned earlier during COVID, and how, we obviously all got accustomed to, being virtual for a lot of the jobs that used to be in person. But then you also think about, like, for the nature of our business, we've got employees that really never had to, not go to the office, or never had an ability to be going to a brick and mortar location. So all of,
Hmm.
like, our frontline locations and stuff that had to go to a store or a call center, our technicians that continue to support our customers in the field. So you think about everything we had to do during that time, and then you mentioned it, the pivot to return to the office, which was a big shift for us to think about centralizing and bringing all of our employees to certain core locations. So what I will say that, that definitely was a big task, especially for my team that had to really show up for their clients to help navigate through that or whatever. But at the end of the day, what I really truly believe is that that in-person connection does drive collaboration, and it does drive innovation. And so there is, obviously all kinds of white papers and different perspectives that you can get on that. But I can tell you, I've seen firsthand how much different it is to have a team sitting together, all together in a room and whiteboarding or thinking about ideas and brainstorming how we can do things differently, and how much more connected and collaborative that innovation that can spur from those type of engagements. So, we're always still going to be kind of that hybrid, or we're still going to have some roles that provide a little bit more flexibility, or those roles that aren't going to be here. But at the end of the day, we've made this investment in our people to make sure that we're bringing them to facilities that they can thrive in, and doing everything we can to make the use of their time when
Hmm.
they're here valuable, and so that they can see the benefits of that in-person, presence as well. So it's been an evolution. We're still learning. We've still got lots of opportunities we can to continue to show up for our employees and support our employees with this, because it was tough. I mean, people had to leave, families behind, and make decisions to move or
Hmm.
not move. And then, just moving into in person 5 days a week, where we've had a lot of more flexibility, kind of that in person. That's been a shift in terms of the changes that means, and the personal sacrifices that people too have to make to
Hmm.
that. But it's all in that spirit of, like, and we know that we can show up for our employees in better ways when they are in person, and we can do the same thing for our customers around, again, just kind of that feeling of that collaboration and innovation.
Yeah, I think it's a great point around the innovation piece of it. Like when you bring people together, you're all in a room together. It is different than just whiteboarding,
Mhm.
on
Yeah,
Teams or Zoom or something like that. It
yeah,
definitely is different. Especially there's so many things that you pick up on that you
yeah.
may not necessarily pick up on when you're looking at each other on a tiny, little, screen here. But one other thing I wanted to bring up, I was just reading an article this morning that talks about quiet cracking. So I don't know if you've heard this term, but we've heard
Mhm.
quiet quitting. There've been all kinds of,
Oh, yeah.
different phrases that have come up. But quiet cracking is referring to the high degree of stress and burnout that's just
Mm,
out there right now. And when I think about things like connection, I mean, there's absolutely, an integral piece here where, when you think about retaining, so our conversation today is about growth and retention. And when people are in that place of, oh my gosh, like our company's gone through so many changes and there's so much going on, and I'm not sure if there's an end in sight. And that's not even adding into the mix the other component around what's happening in the world at large, right? I mean, there's been a lot of disturbing stuff that's happened just in the past
mhm.
week,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I'm just curious if you have any thoughts around that, the stress and the burnout piece and connection, and then also, well, yeah, you're thinking about that, Rick. I also want to tee up for the rest of the group too. We'd love to hear from you all around what you're doing to drive connection, regardless of what your model is, and also any questions that you have too. So, but Rick, let me let you jump in and share any thoughts that you have. That's a bonus question that I just threw in there.
Yeah, no, that's a lot to unpack there. But Nina, I think that the connectivity and making strong connections is actually it's fundamental. It's what we do as a business, right? We connect our customers to greater possibilities and show up for them when they need it most to make sure that they have a reliable connection, right? So if I think about that as we turn the lens internally for our own employees, like I'm glad you brought up the mental health aspect of this as well, because definitely it's one of the things that I think is so important that we, make this very comfortable for people to talk about and when they're struggling, and making sure that we understand and providing them the tools and the resources we need, but also the flexibility when they need it most as well. But I love this aspect around, making sure that we're also thinking about this as it relates to the changes that we've gone through, moving, return to the office, being in the office 5 days this week, because it is real, and we're doing everything we can to try to keep it very top of mind, and do everything we can to provide resources, but also just to create that, like I said, that place where it is safe and comfortable to share stories of where you struggled, and
Hmm.
have that be something that others feel comfortable, because then they can see themselves in situations and how maybe they've managed it, whether that be like how they struggled with caring for an aging parent, or taking care of kids and having to be in the office 5 days. All those things do take a toll. So it is something that is very, very real. I also just think, for me, like that those connections that you make, and call it another way, building a strong network, is so important. I always tell people, when I think about how you think about your career, you've obviously got to think about the most important things that are kind of the table stakes, which is like, bringing strong performance to the table, making an impact, being relevant, and having a good resume of accomplishment things. That's table stakes, but that's probably like maybe, I don't know, 50% of the ingredient. The other ingredients are making sure that you're building those connections in the network, and having the people that are going to be your cheerleaders, and help support you and stick their neck out, on the
Hmm.
line for you, but also, you know, building those working relationships that help you navigate how do you get work done internally. And I think there's such a different way to do that, internally, when you're in person, just walking by somebody that you haven't seen in a while and establishing a connection that may help with a project you are, because they're doing something similar or whatever, just those kind of informal ways. But the power of networking, the power of having these connections, I think is so important, especially for new people that are joining this company and they're needing to
Hmm.
start right out of the gate, building those working relationships and those connections. And, it's really important if we think about, how everybody, has to have that to be successful, especially the size and
Hmm.
magnitude of a company like this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were so many things that you mentioned there that I think are really important, and a couple that stood out to me. Like one, this piece around just vulnerability, right? Vulnerability, being willing to share stories. Like everything's not
Mhm.
perfect all the time, and I think as people continue to move up in organizations, sometimes, I don't know why people think that that means that they can't share when something isn't
Mhm.
going right. I don't think anyone's expecting anyone to be superhuman, but
Mhm.
sometimes, people feel like they can't share that stuff. And so we
Mhm.
each have an opportunity to open that door, and, help people realize we're human, you're human. It's okay. We're not all going to be operating at our best all the time, and that's totally fine. And then Becca actually put a comment in here about just finding ways to bring people together. So it can be simple things, formal coffee gatherings in the cafeteria, or just having puzzles and games, like things that will naturally get people to, interact with each other. So it doesn't have to be some giant something, but so there's like individual behavior that we can each engage in. But then I also hear you saying, Rick, just making sure that we're continuing to think about the resources that our organization has and bringing those forward to individuals as well, so that they're not
Yeah.
forgetting that that's out there. Um,
Yeah, and
it's
I just double
Yeah.
click on, just around making it intentional, like especially just around like in presence engagement. I think I get frustrated when I see or hear clients, whatever, where like, you join a meeting and they're all individually in their individual space, sitting in the same floor, same building. I'm like, what's the point? Like, you've got to make sure that our employees can see that there is a benefit. And so, like, why would you not just pull everybody together? But again, having little events, little social events, or whatever, to bring employees together to, continue to have them strengthen
Mhm.
those networks.
Yeah, 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 and I think that's an important piece too, is just having that consistent focus, right, on your network and developing your network. Um, Rick, hopefully I still have you there. You look frozen. I may have lost you. Um, All right, well, we'll see. But in the meantime, I am going to invite you all to share anything else that your organizations are doing to drive stronger connections. Some of you have been sharing ideas as we've been going through, but this is absolutely a forum and opportunity for you all to share ideas with each other as well. And, certainly if you have any questions as well, feel free to put those in chat. Looks like we lost Rick there. We may get him back. We'll see. But yeah, if you do have any questions, even if we're not able to get to them right here, right now, we will certainly respond to them. But one thing I do want to have you all think about as well is, as a result of having attended this session today, what's one action that you're planning on taking? And would love it if you would share it in chat too, and I'll see if there's anything else coming in. Um, yeah. So one action, because I think it is important to think about what's next. What do you want to do with this? I mean, there's certainly data and information that we've shared around some of the trends and themes, but there's also, I'm sure some of this is reminders as well around some things that you could be doing. So, and I don't know if we just got Rick back.
Yep.
Looks
Can you hear
like we're
me?
getting him back here. No, no worries. We're down to the last couple of minutes here, Rick. But
Oh no, sorry, I
I was just
lost you somehow.
yeah, yeah, no worries that you froze there for a minute. So I see a few different things coming in. Ashley, building the coaching habit as leaders and how to really build in that internal coaching practice, creating space in team meetings for organic connections, creating space for engagement. Um, that's fantastic. Great. Great next steps. Anything else as well, please keep sharing here. Rick, as we are getting close to wrapping up, is there anything else that you would encourage people to do as a next step? And then we've got a couple of slides we'll review really quickly before we wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about a lot of great topics, but I think, definitely from a learning, perspective, making sure that you're doing everything you can to take the oxygen mask when you have time to put it on yourself, to think about how you're going to continue to upskill and retool and stay relevant and stay current so that you can add value in the business is so important. And then always being mindful of those connections and building that network and making sure that you surround yourself with people that
Mhm.
are going to give you that raw and honest feedback that truly kind of helps you grow. I think there's so many things to unpack that we've talked about, but definitely
Yeah.
those are probably two things that resonate the most with me.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And one thing that I'll say, especially as we're having this conversation today, there are so many things that each of us could focus on, right? There aren't enough hours in the day to address every single thing. And so, for those of you who have ever had a coaching experience with me, one of the things that I ask people to do is to think about what are the top three things that you should focus on to have the biggest impact on the business, given your role and given your strengths, right? Like just think about the big three things, because there are like a million things you could focus on, especially as the landscape continues to evolve. But really just being able to, set some priorities for yourself in a landscape of, all kinds of things that you should be doing. And especially as HR leaders, business leaders, the self-care piece, the quiet cracking. We don't want you all to be part of
Mhm.
that.
Yeah,
So,
for
I mean,
sure.
there's so much of it that's going on right now. So, as we wrap up here, just want to mention a couple of things. Oops, here we go. We have a demo of New Lens coming up on September the 25th. So if any of you all are interested in seeing a little bit more and learning a little bit more about what we're doing and the unique approach that we're taking to scale development and development that really results in change, would be happy to show it to you. If you can't make it on this date, we'd be happy to set up some time with you individually. And then we have our next webinar coming up on November 13th. So you can scan the QR code here. And if you use that other link earlier as well, we'll just make sure that you're on the invitation list. We will be sending the recording after this. So, if you'd like to share that with others on your team that weren't able to attend, I know there were a lot of people that were interested in attending today, but couldn't necessarily attend live. And then please do follow us on LinkedIn if you're not already, because we're always putting information out there that can be a great resource for you. But I do really appreciate you all jumping on today with us. And if you have any other questions or anything else you wanted to pose to us that you didn't get a chance to do today, please don't hesitate to reach out and follow up. But thank you, Rick, so much for joining us today. This has been fantastic, and for all of you who were engaged in chat as well in terms of sharing ideas and resources too. Really appreciate it. So you all have a great
Yeah.
week.
Thank you,
All right.
everyone. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks. Bye bye.